Well, hello everyone. We are thrilled to have the opportunity to be with you today. We've got a great program with some amazing people on the program today. We're talking about positive peace. And we've got with us today three peace professionals, right? And a bonus with Chip's wife. Gretchen is here with us as well, but we're thrilled. And we've got this discussion we're going to have about the intersection between professional peace building and the impact crowdfunding movement that I'm always talking about. So um, I think there is more here than you might imagine. And I want to just kind of help us reframe our work in the crowdfunding movement to see its role in positive peace building and to see how we can build on that more deliberately. But let me first acknowledge the support of our sponsors. Purpose Rounds is transforming customers and communities into owners and advocates. We're grateful for their support. Halyard Compliance is one of the leading organizations supporting the compliance of regulation crowdfunding, both for portals and for the issuers, the entrepreneurs who raise. We're grateful for our supporting co-hosts, including Rotary, which is a peace building organization. Rob Kaplan's Move the Needle, Amoeba, the American Independent Business Alliance, and then Funding Hope is a great partner for us, and Ridgecrest Herbals as well. We're grateful for the support and partnership of the CFPA, the Gig Group, Dakin Capital, Jenny Cass, and Mashup Labs, Crowdfund Better, and for this event, the Alliance for Peace Building, and I'm sorry their logo's not showing up properly. That's a tech glitch that's ironic and tragic. Community Vision Solutions, Crowdfund Main Street, and CrowdMax Publishing. I want to acknowledge and thank Chandon, who's here with us. Chandon Saw is the event technology manager who does so much more than that title implies, but he really helps to do everything to make the work of the SuperCrowd move forward, and he does it with genuine passion. Some of what we'll talk about today is financial stuff. I want to make clear we're not offering financial advice. We're providing information and education. I really want you to pay attention to this. We have a program that we've set up to reward you for attending these monthly webinars, our SuperCrowdHour webinars. If you come to 10, we'll give you $100 for you to invest in a regulation crowdfunding offering. We really want you to come learn how to do this. We really want you to invest. We're not joking around. And so we're trying to make this possible. You can, see the full rules there, but we really want you to join the movement here in a meaningful, active way. We have organized the Impact Cherub Club, which is a group of small angel investors that focus on impact. We meet monthly typically on the third Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern, and you can visit impactcherub.com to join. We now require you to also be an impact member of the SuperCrowd, which costs a whopping $5.95 a month. So we hope you'll dig in and join us there. We're also excited about SuperCrowd Chicago, which is coming up in June. This is going to be a great event, June 12th. And so you can register at 4sc.fund/CHI. And I would note that if you use the discount code SuperCrowd, you can save 30% off the list price on the tickets. Now, let me introduce our great panelists today. Chip and I have become great friends because Chip is a great human being. He's also a senior fellow for innovation at the Alliance for Peace Building, focused on nonviolent change and political bridge building through cooperative, cross-sectoral efforts. And he's, living that today. Leveraging complexity theory, his work aims to integrate diverse ideas into peace building and address America's complex social issues. Emily Evans is a researcher specializing in conflict resolution, focusing on the impacts of mis and disinformation, populism, and societal division. With an MA from King's College in London, her work blends cultural anthropology, social psychology, and political science, aiming to bridge cultural and sectoral divides. And finally, Nick Zuroski specializes in peace building, gender equality, and human security with a background in strategic communication and international development. He holds an MA in International Affairs from George Washington University and a BA in Mandarin Chinese and World Politics from Hamilton College. Well, with that introduction, let me shift gears and let's get started in this conversation. I want to start by asking you, Chip, how could crowdfunding be used to create peace-building companies in the for-profit sector?
I think there are two answers. First is that there are existing companies that do or could do peace building, even though they don't think of themselves as peace builders. So you sent Shubar Ali of Garden for Wildlife my way because you saw that possible connection. And we are working with him to figure out how we can work with his initiative to do gardening with native, only indigenous plants to your ecosystem and use that as a way to bring people together across ideological divides. Half our country gardens, and presumably that's not correlated with ideology. And if we bring people together to garden, they can build trust, and eventually we can get them to talk about, say, the presidential election. The second point is really the more one that directly answers your question, and that is, are there ways of using crowdfunding investment rather than simply conventional crowdfunding campaigns to invest in businesses that explicitly do peace building? And one of the reasons I wanted to have Emily and Nick on this discussion is that we've already had discussions about what a for-profit peace building community could look like, emphasis on could, and that we probably, those enterprises couldn't fund themselves through standard venture capital mechanisms because their companies, that should Nick and Emily themselves want to start one, wouldn't end up looking like a unicorn that your standard venture capital firm would want to invest in. And finally, I think it's important to have people like Nick and Emily in this discussion because, with the exception of a place like the Alliance for Peace Building, we've not done a good job of creating career paths for entrepreneurial, bright, young people like the two of them. And Nick may not have to, but many of the rest of them will actually have to go out and create their own for-profit or not-for-profit enterprises if they're going to build meaningful careers. And I'm beginning to babble, so I'll shut up and let you talk to them.
Well, I think it's a powerful insight, and I am eager to hear from Nick and Emily. Nick, let's go to you first. AFP has done a lot of work around both trying to reshape how we talk about peace and peace building so it feels like it can be everyone's issue, right? And of course, that's what we're talking about today, how to make this feel relevant to, crowdfund investors. So can you talk about why you think peace should be everyone's issue and how crowdfunding might play a part in that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Devin. Thanks everybody for organizing this. This is a really intellectually stimulating and needed discussion. So just why should peace be everyone's issue? And this is kind of a phrase I I don't know. I feel like I've kind of have monopolized an AFP's day to day. There are so many things that can spark conflict, violent conflict, instability, atrocities. There are a lot of components of factors that can lead to violence, and therefore peace, which is not just the absence of that conflict, but creating the conditions where everything prospers actively so that conflict and violence doesn't happen, can mean lots of different things. So it means you have enough to eat. It means you have water security. It means you have access to agricultural resources. It means that you have gender equality. If you don't have gender equality, you are not going to have peace and security, because you cannot have security processes, institutions that don't include 50% of the population. People need to have access to livelihoods. They need to have a good government that they live under. They need democracy. They need a secure information environment, online and offline. They need cybersecurity. So there are lots of different sectors that are involved in building peace. And I think peace is unique. The peace building field is unique in that way, in that it's very cross-sectoral. And therefore, everybody can have a stake. The problem with peace building, which Alliance for Peace Building, we are a 200 plus organizational network of organizations that are working in peace building in 181 countries. And we try to be the mouthpiece of the amazing work of these organizations. It's very underfunded. Peace building programs, conflict prevention, atrocity prevention, these types of assistance, activities, they get drops of money compared to other sectors. We do a lot of work advocating to make that change, but it's still an uphill battle. And second, peace building has a messaging problem. I think that peace has been seen kind of as this passive end state. You hold up the peace sign, you say peace is the absence of war. But we actually, AFP, we put out research. We published it in the spring of 2022, but that was kind of the culmination of 3 years of research beforehand. We partnered with an organization called the Frameworks Institute that looked at how can we change how we talk about peace building. And this was specifically looking at a US audience talking about foreign assistance, right? So there's future research endeavors to be had in a way that makes people understand it and then want to support it. And what we found was that if you talk about peace in a way that shows it as an active process, something that's ongoing, something that's not technical, and actually you can point to very clear examples of this was a peace building program in simple terms, this was the impact it had, then you say, this is why you should support it, because that's why it's important. Yeah. And so I think, how can crowdfunding be part of this? One is that, there's this emerging field of peace finance, which is really fascinating. And there are some incredible organizations, including AFP's membership. So I don't want to take credit for peace finance, because AFP has not, been like the founder of that. But I do want to mention this, which is that peace finance basically says the risk of investment decreases when the level of conflict decreases. So if you are investing in mediation, peace building, it's actually an effective way of de-risking your project finance. And then you're going to increase your return on investment. So if you invest in peace promoting businesses, you're going to de-risk project finance, and you're also going to gain investment access to developing markets. Now, I will say we can't just throw money at the problem. If we do channel crowdfunding investment to promote positive peace, we have to make sure that we're really doing so in a way that follows peace building principles. And that means, like, instead of just throwing money at the problem, you have to think through kind of the intricacies of what peace building interventions are needed and what type of assistance. So it really requires a systems way of thinking. There's a really fabulous resource put together. The Peace Dividend Initiative recently established a peace venture fund. And it follows a framework. I think it's the plus P framework that breaks down, like, what does responsible investment that promotes peace look like. So it means, like, being attuned to the early warning signs of conflict. It means making sure you understand who all of the stakeholders in the conflict affected place are, what their relationships are, what the history is, potential grievances that could drive violence, and then therefore what are kind of like the opportunities for prevention that you can support. You need to think about how these would affect different groups of the population. So this is all kind of the lore, I guess, for lack of a better word, of what the peace building field has, applies in its programming. But we have to make sure that we're directing investment funding in a way that lives and breathes those principles. So I'm happy to elaborate more a bit, but that's just kind of an opening discussion. And I don't
Sure.
want to take up too much of time. So maybe I'll turn it back to you.
Well, I think that's great. You talk a little bit about the importance of systems change, and I think Emily is a deep thinker in some of these areas as well. A lot of your work, Emily, focuses around research centers and rethinking spaces, leadership, and partnerships so that more underrepresented people have the opportunity to bring their social innovations to life for peace. What does that look like for you? What are you seeing?
Thanks so much, Devin. Yeah, so for me, I think that rethinking and the innovating, it's really always begun with holding space to ask the questions and to engage those things that make me curious. And the research and the action follow from that, I think. Um, I grew up between countries and cultures, and I think for me, I was always curious about how we can build better together and understand the building blocks of collective belonging, so that we could build in ways that include everyone. And I think what I always found was that, people and cultures are, yes, wildly diverse and also tremendously similar. And to me, that's a real hope for building together and innovating, even creating new ways of funding things for the future. But I think when we think about that, when we're trying to build a world that is representative of all people rather than a few, we do need to start also after that curiosity by asking the question, what's getting in the way? And that to me is what's really kind of driven my research, and trying to gather more data around that. My research focus has been on studying ordinary, non-extremist communities that have chosen to support polarizing leaders, because I'm really curious about how this happens and how we can create effective alternatives. I guess it's really about making sense of the paradox or apparent paradox between our actions and the stories that we tell about them. And I think if I zoom out of that, and the research, and linking it to this conversation, what my deeper goal really has been is to help ordinary people like myself to weave more sustainable narratives and visions that allow us to practically build a world that works for all. I see there's so much opportunity for that through the intersection of peace building and crowdfunding. So something that's been really surprising to me in the data is that I think what I found is the biggest bridge that we actually really have to build is between the local and the global. It's between action and the stories we tell, our narrative, and that goes individually and in our societies. I think that what I've seen in my work and the research is that there's a tremendous divide between these two. It's become apparent, through misinformation. But I think often we believe that as ordinary citizens, we can't really do anything to stop the manipulation. We all have tremendous power, yes, in our everyday actions, but also in the ways that we change the narratives to build new opportunities. And I think that the big question in my research and for peace building and crowdfunding is really, how do we cast more powerful and realistic visions that help us to navigate these intractable problems that we face locally and globally? And I think that's where, when we ask those kinds of questions, that will allow us to fuel action. So, I've had the opportunity to design gatherings and programs that really create space to positively disrupt how we think about who gets a seat at the table, centering young and BIPOC leaders and innovators in United Nations spaces where normally ambassadors are leading the conversation, and instead centering these leaders and, just giving small opportunities for ambassadors to yes, contribute, but to listen in and hear all of the innovations that are happening on the ground. So this is, I think, to me, these are the questions that I start with, and how that begins to fuel action in the world. So it's really that combination of action and research, which becomes the vision for next steps.
Sure. Great stuff. Listen, folks, I want to encourage you to submit questions for our panelists using the Q&A function. And so down at the bottom of your screen, there is a little Q&A button. And if you don't see it because of the way your setup is configured, just click on the More button, and that Q&A function should be available to you, and you can submit a question. But let me come back, Amy, Emily. I want to ask you a follow-up question.
Yeah.
And that is, how might we go about creating a shared narrative for peace building and crowdfunding? What are the elements that would need to be included for it to be effective, for it to work?
Yeah. So when you ask that question, I think to me, it's really, you're asking the question of what makes crowdfunding and everyday peace building compatible. I kind of put on my strategic thinking / peace builder hat here, and I think ask the question, what are the deeper motivations shared between the two of these that we can tap into? Because that's how we begin to craft a shared narrative, is really when we start to understand what are the deeper shared values and motivations. And to me, what I see, and I'm learning more and more about crowdfunding, but what I'm seeing is that both seem to be about both reimagining what kind of world is possible, and the second part is creating the trust to build that world that we believe could be possible through small investments over a long period of time. It's those little micro risks that we can take. I think that second bit of taking the micro risks and creating trust, building step-by-step actions, I think we often think about that in strategic planning, but the actions actually need to be woven into the narrative too, I think. In the peace building world, and AFP's been doing this really well, bringing back the focus to the local. That's been really important. Something I've been kind of using to think about this is a metaphor of, global peace and achieving global peace as something like climbing Mount Everest together. And I think we can't even begin to imagine climbing Everest without the everyday training choices and context-based tools that are necessary in order for us to physically be ready to make that trek. So, if peace is the mountain we're trying to climb together, we really need to first make it realistic at the everyday level. We'll climb smaller mountains through our social enterprises and our peace building organizations, but there's that second part too, which is that I think if we leave it just at the small steps, we'll forget about the bigger picture that actually together, if we come together, we could climb Everest. So I think that's where having a clear vision and for scaling and creating the spaces where we can build that vision together is really important, so that we can come out with a narrative that we're all excited to get behind, even if we are climbing smaller mountains on the day-to-day. I think that if we leave it at just the smaller mountains, we risk being demeaning to the true power of the local. And we also risk, just never achieving the bigger goals that we might otherwise have the capacity to achieve. So I think that that's really critical. And again, I think it's really important that I think people often from there, when I talk about that, say, okay, can you just like give me the narrative that I need to, that we need to have in order to climb Everest? And I'm like, slow down here. What we really need is we need to actually create the spaces so that we can collectively begin to craft that narrative. That doesn't happen through one person saying, okay, this is the narrative we're gonna go after. We need local communities and equitable spaces. We need everyone to come together and have consensus around that shared vision. So, yeah, I think that's what I would say in crafting that narrative.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Chip, I want to come back to you and something you said that is really intriguing in your response to my first question. You mentioned a Garden for Wildlife and Shabar Ali, that the CEO, and how you two had connected, and you were. It's intriguing here. You quickly saw a connection between gardening and communities and peace building. I think it's real. I think it's right. I think it's profound. You kind of gave me credit for having seen that obvious connection when I introduced you, and that is not true. I hadn't made the leap to that connection to peace building. My mind is well enough aligned after learning from you the last few years to at least have seen that Garden for Wildlife was engaged in an environmental positive, and that we all benefit from an environmental positive, and to the extent we remove stresses in society, we are building peace. So I at least made that leap. But I wonder if you would just take a minute, Chip, and talk about how an investor like me and those who are in the room today can screen investment opportunities with a peace building lens. So that becomes a part of their impact portfolio, a part of their objective. What do you think, Chip?
When our phone rang, which hopefully no one heard, because our phone only rings when I'm on a Zoom call, it seems, I was distracted and looked at the participants who are here, and I saw that our new friend Stephanie Geller from Community Wealth Builders in Baltimore is among the participants. So let me answer the question through the possibilities that I see in Baltimore, which is where the first time I got to ride in Shabar's Tesla, which has the color of his company on it and all of his logos. Shabar cannot drive rashly because he'd be easy to identify. But at any rate, one of the first projects that Garden for Wildlife did, because it gives a certain percentage of the money it makes from selling to customers like ourselves to donations to underserved communities, was to plant a garden not far from where we met in Baltimore a month ago. And I could see, talking to him and to Stephanie and to others who joined us in Baltimore, ways of building peace companies that may not put the word peace in their literature, may not define themselves that way. But when Stephanie and I talked about the work she was doing, trying to build community wealth in Baltimore, it felt an awful lot like you and Emily have both used the term positive peace. So the Alliance for Peace Building works closely with two organizations, Rotary International, which has adopted the Institute for Economics and Peace's 8 pillars of positive peace, which I should be able to recite off the top of my head, but I can't. But two of them involve a good business climate, and a second involves a reasonably equitable distribution of wealth and income. And if you combine that with what Emily talked about with locally based peace building, then I can go to someone like Stephanie and say, how can we help you in Baltimore? Or my friend Abby Rappaport in Austin, or my mother's estate lawyer in New London, Connecticut. How can we help you use crowdfunding to build small, locally owned, and as often as possible, women and BIPOC owned startups in your community that may never run the possibility of becoming a unicorn, but could become significant generators of wealth and empowerment, and therefore, by IEP's terms, peace in that community. And when we were in Baltimore, 3 or 4 weeks ago, the weekend before the bridge collapsed, we heard about a couple of those BIPOC-owned startups. One is a woman-owned exercise facility. Another one is a Black-owned vineyard. Neither of those will ever turn into Oracle. Our neighbor across the street is the VP for Oracle, but they could have a huge impact on their community. So as AFP rolls out what we're calling Peace Building Starts at Home, which Nick and Gretchen and I and Patricia Schaefer will largely run, one of the things we are going to want to do is to incubate initiatives in Baltimore. Not that we create them, but that Stephanie and her pals create them. And we add the peace building component. And in some of the language we've been kicking around, we talk about becoming the help desk for people who become peace builders. And, and essentially, you and I are old enough to remember operators who provide, you would call for information for the local phone number. You would call us. At least old people would know to call us. And Nick is laughing. He has no idea what I'm talking about.
That's great. I think that's brilliant. I mean, the power of you and Stephanie working together in this way is really profound. And I'm excited to hear how quickly those conversations we had over pizza and drinks in Baltimore is maturing into real action. I'm thrilled to hear that. As you let me move on. I want to drill down on all these topics, but Nick, you talked about the idea of peace building as an investment, and you talked a little bit about how as we reduce risks associated with conflict, that all of our other things do better, right? Of course, that's true. So there is a return, a literal return on our investments in peace building. Would you just, maybe elaborate on that idea and talk about what peace finance would look like in practice?
Yeah, definitely. And such incredible remarks from Emily and Chip, I think, that kind of help bring this point home. I think Emily has done a beautiful job kind of laying out some of the moral argument, right, behind merging crowdfunding and its objectives with peace building and its objectives. I think as somebody, you know, my day to day as a policy and advocate person at AFP is that morality can only get you so far, unfortunately, with trying to change people's minds. I think morality is the right thing to do, but I think also peace building and using crowdfunding to support peace building is also the smart thing to do. And everything that Emily said is the smart thing to do. Centering local voices in peace efforts, for example. That's smart because obviously they're the ones who are affected by the conflict. So they should be front and center, right? That's the moral argument. The smart argument is they know their context better than anybody else. So they should be the one that design the solutions. They're the ones that will find sustainable, scalable, long-term solutions. So what we do, AFP, you know, in my policy advocacy is say like, look, peace building, yes. Everybody loves to say I want world peace. You watch a beauty pageant, people will say that during the, you know, the spoken Q&A part. But world peace, try and work toward that. That's a smart thing to do. It benefits everybody. You know, the Institute for Economics and Peace, which puts out a lot of seminal reports on kind of capturing the state of peacefulness worldwide, as does the Fund for Peace. They put out research a while back that found, and AFP was involved with this actually, for every $1 of investment you put in peace building, you save $16 on later security or humanitarian assistance that you would have to spend later on down the road. So we really believe like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? And if you invest in peace building, it will come back to benefit you because that's less or fewer businesses that are disrupted by conflict that can then grow. It means there's more economic opportunities for people to participate in. It means you have to spend less money sending millions of blankets and millions of pounds of food assistance to conflict zones. And instead, you can take that money and you can bring it back to your constituency, you know, if you're an elected representative. And that's what we say in our appropriations, you know, in the US is appropriation season even though we just passed a spending bill for FY24 and now it's fiscal year 25. And we're trying to get our message across to the Hill. We work with both parties, AFP. Like, look, this is the smart thing to do. So there's been a lot of exciting developments around what this can look like in practice, which I think I kind of want to also get into, which is there are so many entities that could be for profit that are peace supporting businesses, right? You know, just last month, AFP, we hosted a digital peace building expo at AFP's offices. And this was kind of a show and tell. We had 8 different organizations come in and show examples of interventions, tools, you know, programs that they created to promote peace, like online, trying to reduce online conflict, and then bring that to the offline world as well. And, you know, I run our digital peace building portfolio at AFP, so a lot of work on like harnessing AI for good. And there are so many amazing small companies that could be supported by a crowdfunding model. You know, there's the AI Objectives Institute. They presented at the Digital Peace Building Expo. They use AI to essentially gather community feedback on a particular issue. At our expo, they showed an example of a survey that they did with formerly incarcerated people and trying to map out their needs and their community needs. And then they take the survey and they use AI to present it in a very digestible way. So you're taking qualitative research, which can quickly become kind of over your head, and making it interactive and easy to understand. We had Steve McIntosh, who just developed a depolarizing GPT. So that's you know, everyone knows ChatGPT, of course, it's the same, but it basically will take an issue, particular politically polarizing issue, right? And it will give answers back and analysis in a way that combines both responsible left and right, kind of like philosophy and understanding. So it helps people how can I talk about something that's controversial and it could spark conflict in a way that is less likely to do so. So that's just some examples. You know, there's also just outside of crowdfunding, I mean, peace as an investment has really started to institutionalize lately. And I think there's room for optimism. You know, there's a developing peace bond market. that the African Development Bank and in partnership with a member of AFP, Interpeace, are currently trying to roll out. So these are essentially bonds that can be used to support infrastructure. They can rebuild destroyed or damaged infrastructure. They can finance investment projects that create new jobs, all in conflict-affected and fragile states. And they similarly, they see insecurity as an investment risk and make funding peace building a smart de-risking move. And then, just to kind of on Chip's point on like, to your question for Chip, Devin, on like, what does a peace building lens to investment look like? I mentioned the plus P principle, but there's also the Finance for Peace initiative, which Interpeace has started. They actually have published standards for peace bonds and peace equities. And they lay out how you do that, how you create these types of investment vehicles in a responsible way. You have to have a very clear impact that the equity supports. You need measurable targets for that. You have to start with a conflict analysis. And what that means is you just map out all of the stakeholders in a particular place, and you create a theory of change for how your investment will achieve those objectives. And you need to involve local actors in these processes, like to Emily's point, so that you're being, one, honest to the community, and two, honest in your intentions, and you actually know where you're operating and what this investment is going toward. You have to very diligently monitor and evaluate to see if you're having impact. And you need to anticipate and mitigate potential negative impacts. And so I was really struck also by Emily's comment on the potential shared narratives of crowdfunding and peace building, and how I love your use of the term micro risks, Emily, because I think investment and peace building are very similar in that way, which is that investment is inherent risk. You put some money in, and let's take an index fund, for example, right? And you think, okay, this will probably go down in 3 years, but in 10 years it will probably be up, and then that's the net benefit to me. Peace building, similarly. I don't want to say similar. Peace building is very non-linear. I think peace building recognizes that in areas where you have to build peace, things can backtrack, things can change very suddenly for the negative a lot of the time. When they do, though, that's not necessarily failure. Peace, I would challenge Emily's metaphor of like climbing a mountain, which I do think is beautiful. I would say peace building is like becoming a runner. Because every day you have to go on a run, and it's hard and you're tired. But afterwards, you think, "Oh, I'm really glad I did that. And my endorphins are feeling good, and my mental health feels better." And then you repeat it again and again and again, day in, day out. So it's constant work. Peace building never stops. There's no end point for peace building. But if you are proactive, you can really reap the benefits from it in a continuing way. And similarly, like peace builders programs, peace building focused laws, they're very adaptive. Like they say, like, we're going to try something for a year, see what its impact is. Oh, the impact was kind of what we wanted, but not really. Let's go back to the drawing board and change and see what the impact of that was. So it's very you have to be very flexible. But I think it's really exciting. I think there's a huge potential for crowdfund investors to see peace building as like, oh, I'm supporting a good cause, and like I'm going to make money from it. And like, come on, that's how you actually get people to buy in, which is I want to see tangible benefits from this. So I think it's very exciting. And again, I'm just grateful for this discussion to kind of talk about what it is and why it should be exciting.
Well, it is exciting, and being able to see how peace operates and the financial implications is really helpful to folks who think of themselves as impact investors, like I do, to add this as a deliberate layer rather than a background, a context. When we can be deliberate and thinking as strategically as you three are about peace building and as part of our investing strategy, it really does change the game. Let's come back to you, Emily. In fact, what are the biggest challenges you think we have to face in order to enable people to see social entrepreneurship and crowdfunding as options, real options for financing peace?
Yeah, an important question, I think. And I think to me, I would say that there are really three things that, I mean, I could look at challenges for a long time, but I think kind of synthesizing, there are three main things that come to mind for me. It would, to start, be the privilege and opportunity gaps around, who gets to innovate. Second, I would say the lack of spaces and partnerships that are showing us alternatives. And I'll share more about that. But and I think the third thing is our tendency to wait until global leaders and wealthy individuals are on board before we take the next step. So I think, the privilege and opportunity gaps, we've already talked about that a lot. I think, if we think about peace building as something that we're continuing to build, it's really, imagine that we're overlaying, and I take Nick's point absolutely, that, peace, there is no end goal, except that we still have to kind of have some sort of vision, right? So we have to say that there's still some sort of, okay, we still want to, that's why the Sustainable Development Goals for the UN were really implemented, was how do we look at the bigger picture, right? But if we do use that very imperfect metaphor of the mountain, imagine we were to overlay like Maslow's hierarchy of needs onto our pathway up Mount Everest. I think peace building is really about each step of the process in addressing those hierarchy of needs. And we really have to begin by investing in the basic human needs that aren't being met. I think that we don't always think about peace as, addressing water issues, that the Sustainable Development Goals, again, have helped us to begin rethinking that. But I think it's really important to think about that when we're asking, okay, who actually gets to innovate? And then there's the part about lack of spaces and partnerships that are showing us alternatives. I think that us having this conversation today shows that there are those of us, all of us in our own ways, and I'm sure everyone who's listening in as well is really doing the hard work of showing alternatives in crowdfunding and peace building, and building this trust divide between local and global, and between action and big picture vision, like I talked about before. But some questions that I think we need to ask when we're thinking about those, how do we build more spaces that show us alternatives, is where do local and global leaders share space differently already? Where are local leaders being centered as visionary and get to have a real role in casting global visions? And can we build upon that? I think AFP and everything that Chip and Nick are doing, and the whole team there is really important to that. PeaceCon, their annual conference, has been, I think, a huge step there. But it's continuing to build on that and create more possibilities. Expanding the possibility of who gets a seat at the table is so important. And then also, who might we start investing in, who is already contributing in some way to the world that we want our kids and our grandkids, anyone. We don't have to have kids or grandkids to have that, but anyone for the future generations to live in. So how do we open up more doors to really get to that place? I think we really, as humans, we need to be able to have real world examples to latch on to. And so I think that's what I would kind of focus on. And I would say that last point is just, let's not wait until we see it happening like in big leaders around the world. Because I think if we wait, we're going to be disappointed. And this is, I think, what I love about crowdfunding and what AFP is doing to reframe the narrative of peace is that it's all about grounding back into the ordinary. And it's a reminder that we don't have to wait for elites to start innovating. We really can start with the things that are sustainable for us and taking these little micro risks, and how we invest our time, our financial resources, but also how we invest in relationships. These are all things that I think we take for granted, and they're actually the things that in many ways make the most of a difference in building peace and reshaping how we build a new economy for everyone. So
Well, Emily, I just can't think of a more profound way to conclude our conversation today than what you were just saying. This idea that we don't have to wait for elites. We can take action with, in with how we invest our time, how we invest our financial resources, accept those micro risks, and lean into peace. My gosh, this is such great content. Thank you. I want to thank all of you, Chip, Nick, Emily. Thank you so much for making the time for this conversation today. Gretchen, thanks for joining us. We're thrilled to have had you here. And I want to thank everyone who participated in the audience as well. We have a lot of people in the Zoom room, but I know we have countless people watching on Zoom or on the YouTube live. And of course, we have a future audience of people who will watch this recording. So I thank all of you, whichever group you may be in. I think today's discussion is really profound. It has moved me to be much more deliberate about thinking about peace building as a distinct and separate part of my impact strategy for my investing. And I look forward to applying that expanded lens to my work. I hope others will do the same. Thank you very, very much. I wish you all the success in your great work, Nick, Chip, and Emily. You're great, and I thank you for making the time to be with us today. So, with that, we'll adjourn, everyone. We'll look forward to seeing you at next month's SuperCrowdHour webinar. Thank you very, very much, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, everybody.
thank you.
And thank you, Devin. We are off now to see the great Shalonda. Bye.
Have fun, Chip. Bye. See you later.
Thank you.